I think it's been an extraordinary day. I don't know about you, but I've found the talks stimulating. I found them moving. I mean, I've been genuinely moved by some of the cases and things that have been said. I've been challenged. I've felt uncomfortable. I've questioned why I think the things I do about different things. We've had a number of things outlaid in front of us in terms of the challenges ahead of us that we have to respond to as individuals, as organisations, as a health system, indeed as our nations. What I'm going to do is just give some highlights from my point of view. So these are things that I've thought about. I'm not claiming these are necessarily highlights for you, but I just thought I'd share them, and they're about 6 different things. The first one is the Donald Trump comb-over. Now, that won't be relevant to many of you in the audience, and you might wonder why I think it's relevant to me. You'll have to work on that. But one of the things that I took great hope from, having begun earlier today thinking that comb-over was the only way for me to solve a problem I've got, is hope from David that actually there's a molecule that does everything, and perhaps there's some help there. So that's certainly something to look forward to. There is hope, despite the challenges we face. Tweety Bird. Now, Foucault is pretty deep to get into first thing in the morning, Julian. I don't know about others, but that's pretty deep. But Tweety Bird, I can cope with Tweety Bird and Sylvester. It probably dates me a bit. I'll offer an alternate movie shortly for those of you who are younger than me. But I get the Tweety Bird thing, and I thought that was worth just reflecting on as a kind of metaphor for much of what we've heard today. So for those of you who can recall the cartoons, I mean, Tweety Bird did used to sit often in that cage and sing lustfully and joyously, seemingly unaware at times that there was even a cage around Tweety Bird, just enjoying the moment, enjoying life, enjoying the security perhaps of that cage without thinking too much about what made the bars, on what historical premises those bars had been shaped, why that gave Tweety Bird a sense of security. And I think through today we've been challenged a bit to be aware of those bars, to actually start to ask some questions or continue to ask some questions about what are the premises that we have used to put those cages around the way we conduct ourselves, whether that's as organisations, as colleges, or whether that's as individuals. And this is where I'll just jump to a more modern movie. Has you all seen the Lego movie? I don't know. But Emmett, the hero in the Lego movie, he sings a song called Everything is Awesome. And, that's just wonderful. And as long as Emmett follows the instructions, everything is awesome. Just like Tweety Bird in the cage finds everything to be awesome and sings. But if we start questioning those instructions, the assumptions, then just as Emmett in the Lego movie found, things get a bit uncomfortable and challenging, and just what gives order to our lives can start to seem less clear. And that's an uncomfortable feeling. But I think we've got to have those challenges. We've got to think about those things. We've got to come out of silos, as Nick Talley exhorted us in the beginning, and we've got to ask ourselves some questions. Are those structures we've built up culturally safe? Are those structures promoting safe learning environments? Are they filled with people who are modelling and supporting good self-care behaviours? Are they appropriately supporting ageing doctors? What values are driving our approaches? What unconscious biases? Racism, is that in there in the mix? when we start asking those kinds of questions, particularly if, like me, you do come from a background that has had great privilege, it can feel quite uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean that Sylvester's trying to get in the cage to eat me. Not everything that makes us uncomfortable has got our end as their goal. What we need to do is allow those things to be considered, and perhaps we're uncomfortable because we need to change, or our organisations need to change. And as Paparangi and Greg both explained, cultural safety and cultural competence are about the way, about changing the way we think and go about doing things. We have to be connected to the solutions, and this will require change which may well be uncomfortable. It requires us to be humble, it requires us to listen, and it requires us to hear. Not always the same as listening. Second key thing that came through for me was not losing sight of the person. And this was powerful, I think, in Nikki Stamp's comments, the image of her colleague who had committed suicide. There's a person, not a statistic. That's a real life, a real individual. And it was reinforced, I think, throughout the day, not losing sight of the person, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a fellow worker, whether it's a trainee, whether it's someone senior to us, not losing sight of the person and how they're actually operating and performing. Not losing sight of the person who is our patient. Are we aware to the nuances they're bringing to the consultation? Are we just deploying technology, or are we doing that and at the same time being acutely aware that this is a person at a particular point in time seeing us? What is it about that person at this point in time that will allow us to deploy the technology but convey that we care and we don't lose that? Trish Greenhouse writes a bit on that, and she was mentioned early this morning. I do encourage any one of you who's not familiar with her writings to have a read. She's good value. Our workplace culture. I'm astounded as I move through health systems at how toxic the environment can be in terms of the conversation that doctors can have about each other. They can deliver compassionate care, and they can collect together in little groups and gossip the most poisonous and revolting things, and that's accepted as part of the normal way of doing business. Do we buy into that? Are we feeding on it? I'm far from being without guilt in that space, I'm sure, but I think we've got to think about those kinds of things too. Third point, not to lose sight of the social justice realities of the environments in which we work. And this is complex. It's profoundly complex to think about how we go about changing that if we really take social justice realities as being important for what shapes our colleges and institutions going forward. Admission decisions, resources and power, these things are all occupied by people who, or held by people who have positions of privilege. And if we're going to look seriously at how those change, then that taps straight into levelling, and that will always cause discomfort. Transformational approaches, the fourth point. We had a whole lot of conversations through the day about different ways that we can engage in transformational approaches, including transformational leadership and management approaches, transformational innovative educational approaches like the EPAs that Ole talked about, transformational standards that keep organisations moving forward, moving into new social justice contexts. Transformational, supportive, well-devised designed professional review processes. And we saw and heard about some of the risks of some of those things. Gaming, and clever people are always good at playing games. And again, I was fascinated to see that your two mice, one of them could game the system too, by working out there had to be a better way than keeping on running, just go over the wall. And I think, you know, whenever you've got a system in place, people will think of ways to find paths around that system, which can be superficial and not what the system intended at all. So I'm going to finish now with the final point and pick one of my famous philosophers, a bit lighter than Foucault. It's Mike Brady from the Brady Bunch movie. And he said, "Wherever you go, there you are." And it's sort of really profound when you think about it. But we've got an opportunity to think about where we're trying to go. What we can be sure is we'll get somewhere, but we need to think about where we're trying to go. And I think we've had a number of the challenges about that outlined to us today. Nick called on us to come out of our silos and collaborate and drive change that matters. So let's have conversations about what really matters if we're going to make a difference, if we're going to drive change that does matter. The sessions have outlined some of these challenges. We must respond. It's not easy, but it is essential. And I will finish with another quote from Paparangi Reid, who said, "Let's get on the bus." Well, let's do that, because that actually is a collaborative and collegial thing. It's us together choosing to do things that will make a difference. Thanks very much.